Pierre, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful to have you. And if you could give us a little bit of a background on how Hexoskin is supporting digital diagnostics.
So, well, Hexoskin has developed a platform for monitoring vital signs. So we do support the different types of digital diagnostics and the development of new digital biomarkers. I don't know if you can show the first slide I sent you. The way we see digital diagnostics is that at the core, we're talking about computers providing healthcare services. So we're using medical inputs to understand what's going on with the patient. And we process that information to provide medical and administrative outputs. So there are many types of input outputs. It depends on the application. It depends on the patient population, the medical condition, and all that. But that's the general model. And there's enormous possibilities in terms of product development, in terms of automating healthcare services using that model for digital diagnostics. But if we look at that with a more practical angle, if you can show slide 2, the way we look at it at Hexoskin is from the point of view of automation. So we want to automate all the information processing from a device, a connected device at home, because in our case, yeah, that's right. A connected device at home, a device that the patient can use, that's easy to use, or a passive device in the home environment with a cell phone that relays the information and transmit the data to a cloud-based infrastructure that can store the data, process it, and compute the digital biomarkers using your machine learning models or rule-based models, and then provide in the end summary reports, including the digital diagnostics to the patient, the provider, the people who need to know, and can also perform certain administrative tasks related to symptom detection and diagnostics. So for example, billing codes, going through checklists, warning, different specialties about what's going on. So healthcare is already the #1 industry in terms of job in almost every state in the US. There's a labor shortage now. There'll be more labor shortages in the future. We need to automate these kind of tasks as much as possible so that we can free labor for other tasks and for the human part of delivering healthcare. And eventually, these models that are automated will allow these healthcare services, these digital diagnostics, to be available anywhere in the world, anytime, at an affordable cost. This scales, and that's what makes digital diagnostics so interesting.
Yeah, and it really is. And what you've done with the shirt is extraordinary. I mean, certainly, I've been in biomedical informatics and digital health for 30 years, and there were a lot of these out in the 1990s and early 2000s. Again, nothing that really took and really held. And now you're working with NASA, you're working with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and just numerous other academic institutions like Columbia, Yale, Harvard, et cetera, doing some extraordinary work with them and seeing the price points now move into the B2B to C range. And that's exciting as well. And so when we start looking at this, and you start looking at the presence of the shirt and being able to be adopted by large populations, where are you seeing the digital diagnostics opportunities, whether it's home-based diagnostics or assessments of different post-acute care patients, things like that? How are you seeing this work?
Well, in our case at Hexoskin, we focus on home-based diagnostics and automation. We want to keep patients home as much as possible and support the patient-provider relationship using these tools. So if you go to the next slide. So for example, we're replacing traditional devices with more convenient devices for the patient, something that's more designed with the patient in mind, like this smart shirt for EKG and lung function monitoring that replaces Holter monitors and other cumbersome devices for users. You can use these devices, so the Hexoskin Smart Shirt, for example, for regular testing of COPD patients to assess their health status and to predict exacerbations using algorithms. You can use it for long-term monitoring, and by long-term I mean weeks or months. For example, for a cardiac rehabilitation program. So this is new again, and this generates a lot of data. And again, that's when digital diagnostics come in play. You want to automate all these things. You want to automate so that the computers work for you, the software work for you. We also use that infrastructure. Again, that's, because you mentioned that 20 years ago, it was challenging. I think back then, like, not everybody had Wi-Fi at home. There was no smartphone. All the infrastructure needed to collect the data from the patient and to automate that data flow for digital diagnostic was expensive 20 years ago. But today it's affordable, and it makes it possible. And another application that we've been working on with our smart shirts is the assessment of recovery in post-acute care. So we can assess automatically, using the data from the patient, we can automatically assess frailty, cardiac and pulmonary symptoms. This data can be used by physicians, by therapists, nurses, counselors, case managers, and it can be used to triage patients for home care. So let's say you have a home care population that you're taking care of, you can assess the risk of different patients and assign resources accordingly to optimize your resources and optimize patient outcomes using all this information.
That's fantastic. And again, we're taking questions from the galley and the folks in the audience. So please, if you have any questions, let us know. Vipul has got one, and they want to know, are there any plans for immediate life-saving interventions along with the monitoring? And so that's a great question coming from the audience. Obviously, some savvy folks here, because when you look at the textbook value chain of data, you kind of start with data, then you take that data, you add some analysis, that turns into information. You take the information, you add some analysis, that turns into strategy. You take the strategy, you add some analysis, that turns into interventions and actions. So really, Vipul is actually going all the way down the value chain. What are you thinking about? What's the vision that you have for Hexoskin and actually adding interventions on an automated basis?
Yeah, so we've been working with hospitals for a long time, and now there's a lot of these hospitals that are setting up hospital at home programs. So for patients who need more accurate, high resolution, continuous monitoring. And in these programs, we can use devices that transmit data from the home to understand who's at risk. And instead of calling, in certain cases, instead of calling an ambulance for the patient, we can send someone to the house to do the appropriate intervention for the patient. And that saves a lot of money for the hospital, and it's much more convenient for the patients. And as we practice healthcare that way more and more, we'll be collecting data that will show that it also leads to better outcomes for the patients.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And again, great question from Vipula, and appreciate that. Vipula, really enjoyed that one for sure. And again, we've got a few more minutes here. Pierre, if you could talk a little bit about your approach to not just the design of Hexoskin, but also the validation. I mean, you've got folks in space using this shirt. I can't imagine the validations. I've never done study in space before, but that must be an amazing validation point. Talk a little bit about how you do that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. If you can show the other side, what's interesting with Hexoskin is that we've built an open platform for digital biomarker development. So we've been working with hundreds of research groups that have different interests. I think the first thing you should do when you want to design and validate a digital diagnostic system is to define the goal very precisely, because you want to work with just the right data for what you're trying to solve, for the problem you're trying to solve. And right now, at this point in 2022, we're still talking about very specialized algorithms for a specific condition, for a specific patient population. So what you will want to do is to design a clinical trial or a program to collect data that will help you design the algorithm and do digital biomarker discovery. And then you're going to have another project to validate that algorithm, to validate that with a new population, your algorithm is actually delivering the goods that you estimated in the first patient population that you've monitored. I think what's important to think about, and sometimes researchers who use our platform don't think about it right away, is that if you want that innovation, that digital diagnostic to reach the market, you have to design your data collection and your algorithm design for the FDA, because at some point it's going to become software as a medical device, and you will have to file for FDA clearance. So it's very important to design for the FDA while you're doing all the R&D. And in our case, we've decided to collaborate with research organizations that have expertise on very specific segments. And we've been working on dozens of different digital biomarkers that hopefully will reach the market for all these different patient populations.
Okay, and I think we're talking about the metaverse now for 2 minutes, and you can certainly chime in here, because what we're seeing in the healthcare metaverse is a lot like everything else that we've seen in healthcare over the last 25, 30 years, with the .com boom revolutionizing a lot of industries like retail, like certainly media and banking, and in healthcare, you still walk into physicians' offices and you still see physicians using paper forms and fax machines. And so we're seeing the metaverse now come to life. We're seeing real estate on the metaverse selling for $500,000, $1 million. We're seeing it purchased for that sort of thing. How would your shirt be able to work with the metaverse, and what are you thinking about in that sort of combination product, if you will?
Well, that's a great question. A lot of the care today is still happening over the phone or now video calls, but we see a real opportunity for rehabilitation using virtual reality. Many hospitals in the US have been using it successfully for pain management, but we see application in rehabilitation too. The smart shirts we have that monitor ECG and lung function and movement can be used within these systems to interact in real time with the patient, either within a game or in real time with a therapist, for example, and have access to real time vital signs information from the patient.
Okay, and I think one of the things that we are excited about is this idea that the healthcare metaverse can actually show virtual images and show people what's going on inside their endocrine system, inside their pancreas, inside their heart, etc. And the idea is that now medical education is going to be spot on. And maybe going back to Vipula's question around what are the interventions of the Hexoskin shirt, and maybe once the Hexoskin starts actually showing people what's going on with their bodies and where things are falling out of norm, now in the metaverse they start to see images of what's happening within the body function, the organ function, or whatever it might be, that is happening, and how it's affecting their internal organs. Is that something that you could see happening in then 5 or 10 years down the road?
Oh yes, people are already working on it. So we see a huge opportunity for virtual reality for patients, education, and rehabilitation. And on the other side, also for healthcare staff training. We've been working with many hospitals in the US on how to improve training for healthcare staff, from surgeon to ER staff to paramedics, and how to manage stress among these workers. So that there's a mental health angle that will be very interesting to develop with everything related to simulation. So how do you put these workers or these patients, but on the worker side, how do you put these workers in simulated situations that are stressful, for example, and see how they react, how they perform, and how can we improve training so that all the people who work for patients in an hospital can do the appropriate job under all circumstances.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, again, Pierre, thank you very much. A terrific conversation, and congratulations on your extraordinary.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.